Hey guys, Brian here. Welcome to my lab and thanks for joining me today. I'm very excited about this video. This one's been a long time in the making and I'm so glad we can finally bring it to you. This is the Crested Gecko Complete Diet Review. For this video, I got my hands on every different brand, flavor, and style of Crested Gecko food that I could possibly find, and I've tested them all. I'm going to go through all of them one by one, tell you what's good, what's not, what you should feed, what you shouldn't feed, and a complete breakdown of all the different diets. Really help you guys figure out what you should and should not be feeding your geckos and why. Now, real quick to get started, I'm just going to go through all the different diets and flavors that we have here just to give you guys an idea what we're working with. First off, we have all of the Pangea flavors. Banana apricot, their new breeding formula, the watermelon mango, the with insects formula, we've got the banana papaya, and the Pangea fruit mix. This one's banana papaya as well, the not complete diet. We've got Repashy diets, the Crested Gecko Classic, the normal Repashy Crested Gecko diet. We've got the mango super blend, and also the grubs and fruit insect diet. I've got the Black Panther Zoological diets, melanistic, Black Panther Zoological food, and Color Bomb. We've got Gecko Pro diets. These guys have a whole ton of flavors. We have, let's see, Mellow Melon. We've got Grand Terra Pear. We've got Sweet, what is that, Sweet Fig. These guys have a lot of flavors. They're really cool. New Caledonia flavor. We've got Nuana Mango. And we have Peachy Lychee. I love the name of that one. So those are all the Gecko Pro diets that I could find. We also have Zoomed Crested Gecko food. We've got National Geographic Gecko Entree, Nature Zone Gecko Bites, Fluker's Crested Gecko food, and that's everything. That's all the different diets I could find. I know there's a few more out there that I couldn't get my hands on, or ones that haven't been released yet, but I know they're going to in the next couple months or so, but this is what we have to work with, so we're going to get right into it. To start with, I have split all of these foods. I've tested all of them. I've fed everything here to my geckos to test it out, see how they like it. And to start with, I've split it into three categories. The first category we're going to go to is foods that you should not feed. This is the stuff that's basically just crap. I'm not going to lie to you. There's no reason you should ever feed these foods to your geckos. If you have some, throw it right in the trash. The next section we're going to have is foods that are good, but they're not a complete diet. These are foods that are good as part of a either rotational diet, rotated with other complete diet foods, or they're good with other supplements and especially live crickets. They're foods that are good as part of a diet, but not a complete diet on their own. And then finally we'll have foods that are good as a complete diet. These are foods that you could feed just this food and nothing else, and your gecko is going to be healthy. Now, even with the complete diets, it's best to feed live insects as well, but the complete diets are ones that you can feed alone, just those diets, and the geckos are going to do just fine. So, here it is. Let's get right into it, and we'll start off with the foods that I do not recommend you should ever feed. Alright guys, first off we're going to look at the diets that are made, but I don't think you should ever use. These are ones that, like I said, if you have them, throw them right in the trash. They're doing you no good. I would not ever feed these to my animals. Now, I have tested these and tried to feed them to my animals, but for a number of reasons that we'll go over, I wouldn't recommend it. The first one we're going to start with here is the Zoomed Crested Gecko food. Now, a lot of you are familiar with this kind of food. It's a powder that you mix with water. This, I got a tray here so we can have a look at them all. This stuff is very similar to the Pangea, the Repashy, the Gecko Pro, any of these that we're familiar with. It doesn't smell very good, which is a big indicator, as silly as it sounds. If it smells good, it's going to be palatable to the animals and they're going to want to eat it. They like sweet foods. So this stuff, as you can see, it's a powder. It's a lot like the Pangea diets and everything else, but it's very, very coarse. It's not ground up very well. There's some big chunks in here. There's actually big chunks of either vitamin or calcium powder that haven't gotten chopped up. There's just a lot of chunks in here. It doesn't blend very well. It's very thick when you blend it, almost grainy. The geckos don't like that. Nutrition-wise, just looking at the ingredients, some of the ingredients are a little questionable. The guaranteed analysis of the nutrition actually looks pretty good, but to give you an idea why the geckos won't eat it, we'll go through the ingredients. The first ingredient is rice bran, potato protein, insect meal, dry fig fructose, dried beet, dried banana, pea fiber. So you can see a lot of those, that's not going to be very appealing to your geckos. Potato protein and rice bran is the top 2 ingredients. They list from the most common ingredients downwards. Those are your top 2. So that's not very appealing to the geckos. So while the analysis of the nutrients looks pretty good, it's just simply not something the geckos are really going to be too interested in eating. So that one, the most important thing with food is if they won't eat it, it doesn't matter how healthy it is, it's not doing them any good. And this, I could not get my geckos to eat, so I wouldn't use this. Throw that one right in the trash. The next one we're going to look at is the Nature's Own Herp Products Bites. A lot of people get these at the big chain pet stores. Pretty common there. And this one is, if you guys can see it, they're little square, excuse me, gelatin kind of bites that the geckos eat. Well, in theory, the geckos would eat. And if you break it open here, I haven't opened this package yet. Oh, great, it won't come open. There we go. It doesn't have that much of a flavor. It is pretty sweet smelling, but not a huge flavor. It is pretty sweet though, so it does smell pretty good. But these little bites, they just don't eat them. I put these in with a bunch of my geckos. I had a couple more packages, and none of it got eaten. They wouldn't touch it. So even for smelling pretty sweet, the geckos wouldn't touch it. They just didn't eat it. These little bite things, they just didn't like it. And like I said, if the geckos don't eat it, it doesn't matter what the nutrition's like. And the guaranteed analysis of these is absolutely terrible. Even if the geckos ate this like crack, I would never feed this to my geckos. For example, on what we consider a good diet, we'll just take one of the Pangeas, a good diet. Crude protein minimum 21%. On the Nature's Own Bites, crude protein minimum 1.9%. Crude fat 0.3%, fiber 0.7%, moisture 86%. They're basically water with some flavoring. There's almost nothing to them. There's no nutrients in them. Your geckos aren't getting anything out of it. I don't even know why they consider it food. There's no actual nutrients in it. It's just terrible. To give you a good example here, the top ingredients, most common ingredients, water, sucrose, a bunch of stuff I can't even pronounce, soy protein, isolate, whole egg powder, whey protein. I mean, there's no fruit in these things. I don't even know where the flavor comes from. You get halfway down the list, you finally run into artificial banana flavoring. It's terrible. They're not, like I said, they're not even food. There's no nutrients in them. So why they even make these, I got no idea. But don't feed these to your geckos. You're not doing them any favors. If you have these little bite things, right in the trash. Next up, these are a bit of a laughing stock online. I know a lot of you guys are laughing that I even have them already. The National Geographic Gecko Entree Fortified Daily Diet. It says here, these convenient semi-moist pellets are uniquely formulated to support the health and growth of your crested or day gecko. So again, if you guys remember the good diet we looked at, 21% protein, 5% fat, 8% fiber. Let's have a look at the National Geographic Gecko Entree. A lot of people think it's a good food because it's got a big name on the front. National Geographic, they know what they're doing, right? Crude protein, 4%. Crude fat, 0.15%. Crude fiber, 3.2%. Terrible. Terrible. I mean, they're better than the nasty water bite things we just looked at, but just nutrition-wise, these are terrible. And then if you open up, this is where it gets real amusing. These things are like, I don't even know how to describe them. They're not even like Jello. They're harder than Jello. They almost feel like, I don't know if you guys have ever used like ice, like cooling gel packs, those ones you soak with water and they swell up. They kind of almost feel like those, but harder. Like those if they were covered in some kind of skin. They're like little, I don't even know what these are. They're not food, that's for sure. I don't know, it's crazy. I can't believe that they make these and expect geckos to eat these. I tried to get geckos to eat these, and they're terrible. I actually had a conversation with one big name breeder when these came out, and he was very excited about them because the nutrients, I guess he didn't either didn't look at the nutrients or didn't know what it was or didn't care, but He thought they were going to be the next big great food, and they'd be so much easier to feed because they come in these little pellets and you wouldn't waste as much food, and you could just go and pour a little bit in every gecko's cage or drop some in the food dish. They're totally pointless. The geckos don't eat them. They don't even look at them. They have no smell whatsoever. And scent is huge for geckos. That's how they find their food. They're very scent oriented. So in every aspect, National Geographic gecko food is a complete waste. It's another one that I can't believe they make. So once again, if you pick these up at a big chain pet store, or you got some with a gecko you bought or something, throw them right in the trash. They're terrible. Alright, this next one, as bad as all these foods are and as much fun as we've had at their expense, this stuff takes the cake. Fluker's Crested Gecko Food. Easy to eat spherical granules. I am absolutely baffled that they would ever bring this product to market and expect it to sell. This is another one. This one, surprisingly, if you just look at the ingredients and the analysis, not the ingredients are a joke. If you look at the analysis and the nutrition side, on paper, it doesn't look half bad. 22% protein, 6% fat, only 1% fiber, 10% moisture, which they're a dry food, so expect that. Vitamin A, vitamin D3, vitamin 3, copper, ash. The guaranteed analysis sounds pretty good on paper until you actually look at what this food is. These things, as you can see, are basically little dog food granules. Oh, my computer shut off. Turn back on. I need my logo. There it is. They're dog food. I'm not even joking. They're basically dog food. There's these hard little nuggets. They smell like dog food. They actually smell like dog food. Geckos don't eat dried out, hard little nugget things. How the hell they ever thought geckos were going to eat these, I got no clue. I don't know what testing they possibly did on these, but I guarantee they didn't get any geckos to eat these. And the ingredients list is hilarious. You guys got to check this out. So the ingredients, from top to bottom: corn. The most common ingredient in this gecko food is corn. That should tell you all you need to know. Corn, tomato pumice, chicken meal, corn gluten meal, fructose, fish meal, poultry fat, soybean oil, fish oil, coconut oil, lysine, and then it gets into stuff that I can't pronounce because it's not even real food. Kelp meal's in there. Gotta feed some kelp meal to your gecko. I mean, nothing in that ingredients list is anything you should ever feed your geckos. I mean, maybe poultry fat, poultry meal. They can eat meat. They don't normally, but they could. That's the biggest stretch you can make for anything in this food being considered gecko food. And that's a huge stretch. This stuff is an absolute joke. So, if you have maybe guinea pigs or dogs or cats or ferrets or birds or something that you want to get rid of this food, if you have some, you can try feeding it to them. They might eat it. You could feed it to your crickets. Your crickets would eat it, and it wouldn't be bad for your crickets to eat as a gut load. So if you have some of this, gut load your crickets with it. As far as your geckos go, I wouldn't even let them look at this bottle for being afraid that my geckos would be offended that I hate them. This stuff is ridiculous. So Flukers, I hope somebody from Flukers watches this, because this is seriously disappointing. I can't believe you guys would actually sell this stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to feed dog food to my geckos, so do better, Flukers. So, of everything I have here, those are the ones that I would not recommend at all that you ever feed your geckos. If you have any of those diets, throw them in the trash. Hopefully you didn't buy them for yourself. If you did, that's okay. Everybody learns, everybody evolves. So, live and learn. Don't feed it to your geckos. Throw it in the trash, or feed it to your crickets if you want to use it for gut load. Other than that, they're not worth anything. Get rid of those. So the next set of diets that we have is all of this over here. This is stuff that they're good diets, but I would not feed them as a complete diet just on their own. They're not good enough for it to be a complete diet. There is one missing from here. There's a Repashy banana treat diet that my shipment of that has not arrived yet, so I don't have that to show you guys, but that also goes over here. I'll start off with that one. That's a good diet. It's pretty palatable. The geckos like it. It's not a complete diet. Don't feed that and just that and think, oh, my geckos are going to be fine. But as part of a rotation or with regular dusted crickets or with a bunch of other diets, it's perfectly fine. The same goes for the Pangea fruit mix. Now, this can get a little confusing because it's banana papaya flavored, and they also have Pangea fruit mix complete banana papaya flavored. Just remember, if it doesn't say complete on it for the Pangea foods, it's not a complete diet. So the fruit mix is a good treat. It's good to keep some of this on hand, the same as the Repashy stuff or any of these. Keep it on hand if you want to. Use it as a treat, occasional feedings. Feed crickets, other complete diets with it. And it's a good food. Excuse me. This is just like any other Pangea diet or any of these other powdered diets. Everything else that we have to recommend from now on is all powdered diets. They all mix the same. More or less 1 part diet to 2 parts water. And they should be about the consistency of ketchup or a smoothie, something like that when you feed them. The Pangea fruit mix, a good treat diet. Now, most of the rest of these are Gecko Pro. The Gecko Pro diets I like. They get a pretty good feeding response, but I would not feed them as a complete diet. They're good as a part of a complete diet, but not a complete diet by themselves, just like we were talking about before. So these guys have a whole ton of flavors, which is what I really like about them, and I think their naming scheme for their flavors is awesome. I mean, Mellow Melon is a good name. Grand Terror Pear is a good name. My favorite is the New Caledonia flavors. I mean, that's a good name. All of these geckos we breed come from New Caledonia. My favorite is the Peachy Lychee. I don't know where that one is. Peachy Lychee, right here. This stuff is awesome. The Peachy Lychee I got a better feeding response out of. All of these got a pretty good feeding response, but some of them just seem to get a stronger response than others. I like the way the Peachy Lychee smells, and that was a good feeding response. The other one that I got a good feeding response out of was the Sweet Fig. I like the Sweet Fig in the wild on New Caledonia Island. Figs are a huge part of the gecko's natural food source. They love figs. They eat them when they're in season. They fall off the trees and rot on the ground. The geckos eat them, so these ones smell a lot better than this stuff, let me tell you. They're not dog food. The Sweet Fig is a good food. I like that. Any of these have a fairly strong feeding response. I'd recommend any of those as a treat, an occasional treat or a part of a complete diet, like I said before. Now, to get into the good diets, what should you guys be feeding your geckos? The staple of your diets. Before we get over to all this over here, I am going to say crickets. It is, I think, an essential part of a complete diet. You need to feed your geckos crickets. You can feed them one of these complete diets only. It's not going to harm them necessarily, but I think there are enormous benefits to feeding crickets, particularly if you're breeding your geckos. If you plan on breeding at all, that's a lot harder on their bodies, males and females, but particularly females. You've got to feed crickets. It's just so much better for them. Also with young ones, they grow faster, they get bigger, they don't lag behind all the others, grow really slow and end up stunted. Crickets are just so beneficial. The biggest thing when it comes to feeding crickets is gut loading your crickets. You hear a lot about gut loading and dusting your crickets. Dusting your crickets helps, but if you're feeding crickets as part of a complete diet with all of these and you don't dust them, it's not the end of the world because all of that calcium and nutrients are getting out of this food. Dusting crickets, that practice mostly comes from animals that only eat crickets or are mainly insect eaters, like leopard geckos. With crested geckos, it's not 100% absolutely vital that you dust your crickets. You absolutely should do it. A nice calcium vitamin supplement to dust your crickets with is great. But more important than that is gut loading your crickets. So many times I've talked to people and they talk about gut loading their crickets and they say, yeah, I got some crickets from the store and well, the store had them eating some carrots so they were gut loaded, or oh, I put them in with a good quality gut load overnight and then fed them the next day. And that's just simply not good enough. You have to think of these mass-produced crickets. The people producing these crickets in giant numbers are not feeding them a good diet. They're feeding them the cheapest diet they can to get them to grow up so they can sell them at the lowest cost. That's their whole game plan. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's business. That's how it works. As the reptile keepers, it's our responsibility to make sure we're giving our animals the best meal possible. And that means gut loading your crickets for a minimum of 3 days. You need to give your crickets time to ingest that food, metabolize it several times. Think of it this way. It's like if your crickets are just basically nutritionless, poorly fed, mass-produced crickets, and you gut load them with a carrot overnight, you're just feeding your geckos poor, nutritionless crickets with carrot in their bellies. Even if you use a high-quality gut load, you're feeding them bad-quality crickets with a high-quality food in their bellies. They have to have time to metabolize that food to really make it a part of their bodies. It can't just be something they eat once. It's somebody who's really out of shape and eats one apple is not a healthy person now because they have an apple in them. They have to work at it and eat a lot of healthy foods over a long period of time. So, gut loading crickets, I can't overstate that enough. It's extremely important, and you will notice a difference. If you gut load your crickets properly, it makes a huge difference in how your geckos grow and how that affects them. Now, crickets aside, let's get into the prepared gecko diets. So first we will start with the Repashy diets. So there's 4 main flavors of Repashy. And like I said, there's the one treat flavor that I don't have here, but that one's not a complete diet. 4 main flavors of what I would call complete diets for crested geckos. The Crested Gecko meal replacement powder, this is their normal kind of standard Repashy. This stuff is really good. I fed this food exclusively to my collection for 5 years. And I have also fed Pangea exclusively for 5 years. Almost 5 years. And I now feed both diets together. I've had at different points, I've gotten both diets and I feed them all in a rotation. That's what we do now because I like feeding a variety. Repashy, great food. Alan Repashy, dang computer. Alan Repashy pioneered crested geckos as a pet. He imported the first geckos to be brought into America. He was the first person to mass produce geckos for the pet trade. He was the first person to identify a lot of morphs and the first person to breed for pinstripes. Without Alan Repashy, there are no crested geckos. None of us own crested geckos without this guy. He's been in the game longer than anybody else, and he absolutely knows his stuff. His foods are top-notch. You can trust what he's putting in his foods and trust the nutrition because nobody has done more research than him. Now, his normal food, good feeding response, the Crested Gecko diet, great stuff. I like this stuff. The Mango Super Blend, I don't personally use too much. I've used it before. It gets a pretty good feeding response. It's a little sweeter flavored, I think. Absolutely a great food if you're looking for more variety and you want to stick with Repashy. Mix this into your lineup. Great food. Then there is the classic. Now, the traditional Repashy, he's made a few different versions of and refined the formula over the years. The classic is, it's an advanced formula, but it's made to mimic the flavor of past formulas. So it tastes more like the classic Repashy. If those of you that have been around since the 2000s, 2008, 2009, that time, the first classic Repashy flavor, that's what this is. I like this flavor a lot. He made this because a lot of people said the newer flavor their geckos didn't like so much, so he came out with the classic flavor to give people a little more option, some more choices. The classic flavor is great. It gets a great feeding response as well. Now, the grubs and fruit, this is his diet with insects mixed in. He uses black soldier fly larvae for the insect protein in this diet. It's got a higher protein level and insects mixed in, obviously. This one I get less of a feeding response from. It's just not as sweet. The geckos don't feed on it as enthusiastically, you could say. And I think that's just the insect protein mixed in. Takes some of the fruit flavor away. So that one is a good option if you want more protein, but the feeding response is not as strong as it is on these 3. Regardless, all 4 of these foods, absolutely great. You cannot go wrong with Repashy. The next food that we have, where's the rest of them? Here it is Black Panther Zoological Foods. These guys are one of the newer diets, and there's a lot of newer diets popping up here and there. You see new ones come along all the time. Some of them last, some of them don't. This is the only one of the newer diets that I've tested, tried, and would feed as a complete diet. They have 3 different types. Real quick before we get into the flavors, Black Panther Zoological, their entire business scheme, everything they do is based on insect protein. No whey, no eggs, no whey protein, no egg white protein. It's all insect protein based. And all natural human grade ingredients. So, great diets. I personally don't have any problem with whey protein or egg white protein in my gecko diets. I have fed diets that have that for almost a decade and had no problems with it. It works great. But these guys prefer all insect protein. Crested geckos are mainly insect eaters in the wild. That's a bit of a myth people have about them, is that they eat mostly fruit in the wild and occasional insects, when really it's the reverse. Their main diet is insects with whatever fruit or nectar or pollen that they can get their tongues on. So these guys being insect based, it's supposed to mimic their natural diet better. So they have 3 normal flavors: the Black Panther Zoological Original Complete Crested Gecko Diet. Just like everything else we're talking about, these are powdered diets. These ones smell fairly good, not as fruity smelling as some of the other ones, but they still get a pretty good feeding response. And as you can see, these ones are really fine grained powder, so they mix up pretty good. They're smoother when they get mixed up than the, like we talked about earlier, the Zoo Med diet is really chunky. These are fairly smooth. So on top of the original diet, they have melanistic that has black soldier fly larvae in it. That's where they get the insect protein for these ones. And the melanistic is melon flavored, obviously, and does smell a little bit sweeter than the original. The feeding response I get from this is about the same. It's the same consistency as the original, and they seem to eat it, as far as what I've seen in my geckos, they eat it about the same as the original. And the last one I want to talk about is the Color Bomb. Now the interesting thing about the Color Bomb diet is it has ingredients that in theory will make the colors in your geckos brighter. It's the same theory behind a lot of fish foods that make the colors in your fish brighter. Same kind of theory with this. Not the first diet to include this, but I will say a long time ago Repashy came out with something called Super Pig, and that was an additive you could mix into your diets, a pigment enhancer that you could mix into your diets, and it was the same kind of ingredients that would make the colors in your geckos brighter. The problem with Super Pig was it was so strong it killed the flavor of the diets, and the geckos wouldn't eat it when you mixed in your diets. Now personally for me, I like the effects of the Super Pig, or would be the Color Bomb. Personally, I take the Super Pig powder from Repashy and I dust my crickets with it. I mix it half and half, well, less than half and half, but I mix it in with my calcium and vitamin powder, and when I feed crickets, I dust them with the Super Pig. I also mix the Super Pig into my cricket gut load, and the crickets eat the Super Pig, and that in turn, the geckos eat the Super Pig out of the crickets. So that's how I get it into my geckos. I like the effects on it. I've never done an official study if it actually makes the geckos brighter and the colors more noticeable, but I think it does. I love the colors in my geckos. I've done this for a long time. I think it works, so I'm going to stick with it. If you want an easier option than doing it the way I do, feeding the crickets, get some Black Panther Color Bomb. This stuff, just instead of where the Repashy diet with the Super Pig mixed in, the geckos didn't eat it, this one still has a fairly fruity flavor and scent. The pigment enhancers in this diet do not disturb the flavor that much, and the geckos will still eat it, which is, as I said before at the start of this, the most important part. If the geckos don't eat the diet, it's not worth getting. So the Color Bomb is good. The geckos will actually eat it, and that is a giant plus as far as pigment enhancing diets are concerned. Now the last brand we have to go through is the Pangea brands. Pangea is one of the most popular brands. Pangea and Repashy are by far the 2 most popular brands, and they are the 2 most highly regarded, most researched, most tested. Absolutely great. All the Pangea brands, as I said before, I fed Repashy exclusively for years, and then I fed both together, and then I fed Pangea exclusively for years, and now I'm back to feeding both together. So they're both absolutely great diets. The different Pangea flavors, we have the original is the watermelon mango. This stuff I get a great feeding response from. Absolutely great. The geckos love it. I feed this on a regular basis to all of my animals. The banana papaya was the second flavor they came out with. This one I get less of a feeding response on. I have fed it for years. I don't feed this one so much anymore just because the feeding response on this is less than the others, but it's still a solid diet. They still definitely eat it. It's got a good feeding response, a great diet. The banana apricot. I like the banana apricot a lot. It's a little higher in fat and protein than the original watermelon mango, and the consistency on this one. The big thing I like about the Pangea diets is how fine they are ground. They're ground finer than any other diet out there. So they are smoother. They're almost milkier. Not milkier, but that kind of milky consistency. Very, very smooth. No chunks or grain whatsoever when you mix it up. As you can see with the banana apricot diet, it is very, very fine grain. Much finer than sand. If you see like play sand that you see really, really fine play sand, beach sand even, it's much finer grain than that. So I love the way this stuff mixes up. It is so smooth. That makes it so palatable for the geckos. I feed this on a regular basis. The Fruit Mix Complete with insects. This basically is the banana apricot with insects in it. The old version had, I believe, freeze-dried crickets ground in it, and the newer versions actually have black soldier fly larvae, which I think mix up better. Mixes finer grain and mixes up smoother. So just like the previous diet we looked at, this stuff is so fine grain, it's almost like powder, like talcum powder, than it is a grain. Even the Repashy is a little more grainy than this stuff. This stuff is so fine, so powdery, it mixes up great. I love this insect stuff. I feed a lot of this. And then the last one we have is the brand new breeding formula. The breeding formula has been specifically created for breeding geckos. So it's got extra fat and extra calcium for actively breeding geckos, because that is so much harder on their bodies to create eggs and be constantly producing. This stuff is great for them. It helps them replenish all those nutrients and fat and calcium that they're using to create eggs. The breeding formula is awesome. We are in the process of adding this into our main rotation for our adult breeders. And it's a little more grainy than the other flavors we looked at. It's more on par with the Repashy or the Black Panther Zoological. It's far less grainy than the, whatever this crap was, the Zoom Ed stuff. So it still mixes up very smooth. It's just not that talcum powder smoothness that the other ones are. But the feeding response on it is still very good, and it has a lot of added benefits. So those are all the diets that I could get my hands on to just to give you guys a good overview of everything we have, what you should and shouldn't feed. Now real quick, just to give you guys a rundown on how I feed my geckos. I have a very large collection of geckos. We usually sit somewhere around 28 to 3,200 animals, depending on the time of year. So we've got a lot of geckos to feed. And obviously I want them to be eating the best diet possible. If they're not healthy, they're not going to produce well. I can't sell unhealthy animals. It's the most important thing, is feeding my animals a healthy diet. So what we do, the rotation I currently feed is these three Pangea flavors. We've moved to these three flavors. We're going to bring in the breeding formula. This just came out. It's brand new. We're going to bring in the breeding formula for the adult geckos. We do the insect formula. I like the higher protein for younger geckos to help them grow. Their bodies growing require more protein. So I like the insects formula for the younger geckos. And then the watermelon flavor, we rotate between these two for the breeders and these two for the young ones. Now on top of that, we have the Repashy flavors. I personally don't use the grubs and fruit because I use the Pangea version of the insects, but we do feed the regular Repashy, and once in a while I'll get the classic version as well, and we feed that on rotation with everything. So just a quick breakdown, our hatching to juvenile to grow out geckos, anything younger than adult breeding, gets a rotation of Pangea with insects, one of several Repashy flavors, and the Pangea watermelon and mango. They rotate between all three of those. I like to feed a rotation. I think it keeps the geckos more interested in the food because it's something new. They get a different scent every once in a while. I found it triggers a better feeding response to rotate through flavors. That's what I feed for my younger geckos. For my older ones, we feed this rotation. One of the flavors of Repashy, the normal, the classic. Once in a while I'll get the mango in, but usually the normal or the classic. The Pangea, watermelon mango. And we're moving over to the breeding formula. We used to feed them the banana apricot a lot, and we're kind of phasing this out to bring the breeding formula in. The only reason I do it this way instead of feeding everything is because it's easier not to have 8 tubs of food. We go through 5 to 6 pounds of food a week here. So I usually, when I order food, I order it 80 to 100 pounds at a time. And it's easier to get just 3 or 4 flavors than it is 9 or 10 flavors. So that's kind of the rotation we feed our geckos. Any of these foods that we've talked about, any of the ones I've given a recommendation to, you guys can feed your geckos. They are all great foods. Excuse me, save for these 4 back here. And the dog food that nobody should eat. I probably wouldn't even feed it to my dog. I like her too much. Anything else, if you guys want to mix in one of these treat foods, I call them treat quality because they're not complete diets. They're more of an occasional treat. If you want to mix in any of these, they're great. They help with that, like I talked about, rotation, new flavors. Keep your geckos stimulated and engaged in their food. They eat more that way. It's just overall better for them. So these are great for that. Bring in new flavors. You can get a small bag of this every once in a while, and then get another small bag of another flavor, and then a small bag of this, and a small bag of the Repashy banana. Oh, my diet's falling over. Just to mix things up, to keep them on their toes, kind of. And then use these as your staple diet, and don't forget your crickets. I'm a huge advocate for feeding crickets, even with the breeding formula or the insect formulas. They're great, but they're not a substitute for live crickets. So that's kind of an overview of all the different foods I've tested, my thoughts on them, how I feed my geckos, how I think you guys should feed your geckos. If you have any questions about any of this, comment down below and I will answer your questions. Any other new kinds of food that come out and you want an opinion on them, comment down below. If I have tried them, I will let you know what I think. If I haven't tried them, let me know new stuff that comes out. If I haven't heard of it, I'll go look it up, pick some up, and we'll do more reviews in the future on new stuff that comes out. If you want to buy any of these diets, there are links in the description to buy everything on here except for the dog food and unedible crap that we have in the back. Everything else, Black Panther, Gecko Pro, Repashy, Pangea, all of this stuff, links in the description to buy it. Click on those, check it out, get your geckos a high quality diet and they will thank you for it, I promise. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope this video has helped you out and given you a few ideas on how to feed your gecko and how to take care of them. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click over here, visit our website, click over here to see more videos that we've posted. Subscribe to our channel, and we will see you guys soon.